Hi there, I'm Jeremy O'Carroll, founder and director of the Fitzroy Learning Centres. What I'd like to do today is guide you through our entire program to give you a very quick idea of its strengths and benefits. In today's presentation, I'm going to be covering phonics, why it works and how the Fitzroy Method teaches it. This is important because our method is a phonics method, so unless you understand phonics and how we use it, then you're not going to be able to understand our program. Next, I'm going to be talking about the system and structure of the Fitzroy readers. What really differentiates our method from others, what really determines our success, is that it's a very systematic course. In fact, our course could well be the most systematic and well-structured reading program out there on the market today. Next, I'd like to talk very briefly about the psychology behind the program. What you may not be aware of is that our method has actually been classroom tested for 36 years. In other words, we've had a lot of exposure to children teaching our method, and along the journey we've learnt a lot of tricks, ways to successfully work with students so that they get the most out of our program. And so we'll talk in today's presentation just a little bit of some of those details, some of those psychological methods which we use to get the most out of what we teach. And finally, I'm going to talk about all the supplementary material that goes to make up our program. Many of you will know that the skeleton, or the backbone in a sense, of our program are the 70 Fitzroy readers. Well, we also have a lot of other supplementary material, and when working together, we get the very best results from our method. Okay, so what exactly is phonics? Well, the key thing to remember is that all phonics systems use the alphabet. And what exactly is the alphabet? It's a sound code. Now, what that means is simply this. Every letter in the alphabet stands for a sound. And in a phonics system, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking these sounds, running them together to form words. Now, the great thing about any reading method that uses the alphabet is it really simplifies our work. Think of the alternatives to an alphabet like character-based systems, for instance Chinese, and you realize that their students have to spend an awful lot of time learning thousands and thousands of different symbols. Well, in English, of course, since we do use the alphabet, we only need to learn 52 symbols. That's 26 lowercase letters and 26 uppercase. So let's have a look at how the method works. Let's take a word like cat. In phonics, all we're going to do is run the sounds together to form the word cat. So we've got k, at, t. We sound them together, k, at, t, and we get the word cat. Or p, I, g. We run the p, I, g together and we get the word pig. And that basically is how phonics works. Now, the glorious thing about it is that you can actually now, just having learnt the basic 26 letter sounds, read thousands upon thousands of English words. And in fact, you can often read even long words. For instance, picnic, p-ik, n-ik, or pond, p-o-n-d. So once you've taught children the basic 26 letter sounds, then it's very easy to get them to read a whole lot of words. And that, of course, is what our program's going to do. It's the very first stage in our reading method. We'll be teaching children the basic letter sounds. Of course, we all know reading English isn't that simple. We know, of course, we've got the 26 written symbols, but the problem is that English actually has about 44 to 45 different sounds in it. So how do we go from the 26 sounds the letters of the alphabet make up to 44 sounds? Well, the solution is what we term digraphs. In other words, that's putting two or more letters together to form an entirely new sound. Now, you'll notice that we've kind of given digraphs a more general meaning. Literally, it will mean two letters put together to form a new sound. But what we've done in our program is attempted to avoid all jargon terms. We're really trying to make it very easy for the end user to use. So we're not complicating things with technical terms. We're keeping it simple so that everyone, parents, teachers, can readily understand how to use our method. So with digraphs then, as you can see, we simply take two letters, we put them together, we form a new sound. So down the bottom of our screen you've got examples like R and Ch, and they're very different from the basic letter sounds For instance, ch would be k, but they're the basic sounds, but ch is quite different. So that's the beautiful thing about digraphs. We learn simply to put different letters together and they will form us new sounds. And on the right of the screen you can see some examples. In Reader 17 we teach the digraph sh as in fish, and in Reader 15 we teach the digraph all as in small. So once we've learnt the basic letter sounds and we start integrating the digraphs, then actually a huge percentage of English words can be readily read and understood. For instance, take even a long word like birthday. Well, it's simply broken up into basic letter sounds and digraphs. For instance, b, the digraph the digraph th, the single letter sound d, and the digraph a. So you run them together, b, th, d, a, and you get the word birthday. Other words where you can do that would be things like moonlight. You go all, I, t. So you get the drift. It's actually very easy to read with even just those two skills, basic letter sounds and digraphs. And what we're going to be doing throughout our program is just very systematically, in many cases just one by one, introducing the digraphs. We're very careful not to overload the student with too much new material. What we want to do is always keep things simple, always keep things manageable. So we just, in a lot of cases, add one new digraph or one new sound per reader. And so here's some examples. In Reader 21 we teach the sound ch as in chug, in Reader 23 the w as in when, and so on. Of course, many people you talk to are going to say that they've heard and they know from experience even that English is very irregular, and so they're not quite convinced that phonics systems work. They're not quite convinced that you can actually learn enough rules about English to really help you read and write successfully. So that's a good question and we need to address that. So is that really true? Is English too irregular to make it worth our while to learn a phonics program? Well, let's have a look at a sample sentence. The cat was on the mat. Now, if we break it up into phonic words, in other words, ones we can just sound out easily, and non-phonic words, it looks like it's about 50-50. And so if we just use that sentence as a model, then we'd say that phonics covers 50% of English, which is not really very good. So let's see if we can't do a little bit better than that. Well, what we actually find is that if we just learn 4 key things, we're going to be able to cover between 90 to 95% of all English words, and in fact those 90 to 95% are going to be the more common ones. So the final 5% are much less common words we probably won't be encountering too often, and we'll just need to learn them on an individual basis. So what exactly do we need to learn to get to that 90 to 95% of reading and writing ability with a phonics program? Well, quite simply, we need to learn the basic letter sounds, we need to learn the digraphs, we need to learn spelling rules. A spelling rule might be something as simple as take the word run, you want to add ing to make it running, but to keep that short sound in run, you've actually got to double the N. Now that's a spelling rule. In our method we cover all of the main or the most important spelling rules, just like run to running. What else do we need to learn? Well, we also need to learn the 50 most common what we call special words, but what are more commonly known as sight words. So these are typically high frequency words like said and that and was, which appear all the time but have irregular spelling. So if we learn the 50 most common ones of these, and again we teach these 50 most common special words in our program, just bit by bit. Well, once we learn those, we integrate them with the basic letter sounds, we integrate them with the digraphs, then and the spelling rules, then actually we get up to the 95% of English, which we can then read and write with a phonics method. So actually English isn't as irregular as it might first seem, but we do need to learn those 4 key ingredients. Let's have a little bit of a look at some of the difference between a system like phonics and the other main system today, which is whole language. Now, whole language in its pure form doesn't bother learning the sounds the letters make. It simply gets children to recognize whole words. So let's have a look at some of the differences then. Let's take a word like chicken, and let's imagine that we've learnt it phonically. So we've learnt to sound it out ch, I, k, e, n, And then after learning to do that, we come across the word chin. Now, let's suppose we've never actually seen the word chin before. Well, the question is, can we read it? Now, the answer is, of course, yes. Why? Because we've already learnt all the component parts in chin from the word chicken. But, and here's the important thing, if we were learning through whole language, then we would not be able to read the word chin unless we'd already been taught it, because we haven't been trained to break down the word into its component parts. We wouldn't have even learnt those component parts. We're actually required just to memorize the whole word. So you can see that while it may take a little bit of time for people using a systematic phonics program like ours to get going, because we need to learn basic letter sounds, and we then after a while need to learn things like digraphs. Well, while in whole language you can suddenly read words like chicken the first day of class because you just learned to memorize it. But after that it gets very tiring to learn through whole language because you have to learn every single word on an individual basis. Whereas with phonics we simply learn phonic rules which are then going to help us decode other words, even words we've never seen before. And that is the beauty of phonics systems. Now, just to give you an indication of where phonics stands in the reading world today, well, there's actually no doubt that it is the preferred method today. And as far back actually as 1995, the US government legislated for phonics to be used in the classrooms around the United States. In 1998, the UK government did the same. And in countries like Australia, which admittedly are lagging a little bit behind, but in their remedial classes, they've also now decided that they will only fund phonics programs. So all around the world, there's been a huge shift back to phonics. And the good news then for teachers, educators, and educators is that they know that if they introduce a phonics program today, then they're not going to find all of a sudden a year or two later that it gets replaced with another reading method. Phonics is definitely here to stay. Okay, where does the Fitzroy method and the Fitzroy readers lie in the context of this phonics world? Well, we really were the people who reintroduced phonics into Australia at a time when whole language was very popular. In fact, we introduced our method as early back as 1976, which was 19 years before the US legislation for phonics. And an interesting thing about our method is it was actually developed for teaching success, not profit. In other words, we never ever imagined that we would be selling our method to the public. It was simply designed to work in Fitzroy Community School, which was a small private school in Melbourne, Australia. And it was designed simply because at the time it was impossible to get phonics educational materials in Melbourne. It was at least very difficult. And so the founders of Fitzroy Community School, Faye Berryman and Philip O'Carroll, decided that what they really needed to do was create their own reading program. Well, this reading program ended up having so much success that teachers from other schools started to inquire about it, and they would say, well, look, how is it that you're getting such great results? And it soon became apparent that the reading method we were using was very successful. As a result, these teachers from other schools then requested that the reading method was made available to the general public. Now, there was a degree of reluctance initially on behalf of the founders of Fitzroy Community School because they were not publishers, they were educators, but eventually there were enough teachers from all around the place that insisted, and as a result they eventually made the Fitzroy method available to the public, and from then it's gone from strength to strength. In fact, the school's results using this Fitzroy method are quite remarkable. Recently the Australian government has introduced national testing. Fitzroy Community School has always done well in the top 1% of Australian schools, but in fact it's done a lot better than that. According to one of Victoria's leading newspapers, The Age, it actually ranked Fitzroy Community School as the very top school for reading, writing and grammar of all the schools listed where the school had full participation rates for the testing. What some schools unfortunately did was removed their less good students from the testing, but of all the schools that actually put all their students into the test, well, Fitzroy Community School came top. In fact, the school's results are so successful that now if you wish to gain a place at the school, you have to spend several years on a waiting list. In fact, for some people, it's almost necessary now to enrol their student or their child at birth just to secure a place at Fitzroy Community School. That's how popular it is. And not surprisingly, Faye Berryman, who helped create this system, has also met with a good deal of success. And as far back as 2001, she was shortlisted for Teacher of the Year awards. She's been generally recognised as one of the pioneers of good phonics education. How successful has the Fitzroy Method been then in Australia and the rest of the world? Well, it's been used by over 3,500 Australian schools. It's become hugely popular for remedial students and English as second language students. It's used in such countries as Taiwan, Singapore, Korea, Thailand, Japan, Malaysia, and other English-speaking countries like New Zealand, UK, and more. Why the success? Well, as we suggested earlier, our program really is successful because it's just so systematic, it's so structured, and really all it does, in a nutshell, is it teaches the four critical component parts of a phonics system. It teaches the basic letter sounds, it teaches the digraphs, it teaches the formal rules by which English is spelt. Examples, remember, we gave was run to running. And it also covers those 50 most common special words, and these were words like said and that and was. You have to be very careful, however, when you're choosing a phonics program, because many programs call themselves phonics, but in fact they are only partly phonics. This sort of mix and match approach where people use a little bit phonics, a little bit whole language, has been called incidental phonics. And what educators around the world have discovered is that when you mix and match, you don't nearly get the full benefit of a phonics program. In fact, so disappointing are the results that one expert even claimed, this is William J. Bennett writing for the Wall Street Journal, he claimed that this mix and match approach, or this incidental phonics, is the educational equivalent of treating polio with aspirin. So how do we put together our program then? Well, one good way to get the general gist of where the pieces fit in our Fitzroy Method is by turning to the master list, which can be found in the Fitzroy Method Teacher's Guide. And if you look at that, you'll see that we've got, in the first 5 readers, we're teaching the 5 basic sounds, and in each subsequent reader, we just teach a new sound or go over a new sound. If you look at the right-hand column labelled special words, you see how we just introduce a few of these each reader, at least for the initial stages. As we advance, if we look at some of the higher readers, you'll see that we start teaching the digraphs. For instance, in reader 18, we teach ing as in sing. In reader 19, we teach r as in mark, and so on and so forth. But what's really remarkable about our system is until reader 28, we actually only teach 1 new sound per reader. In other words, we make it very manageable for the student. We don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. If you do that, they get confused. When they get confused, they lose confidence, and before you know it, they don't like learning English. So it's very important for our program to just work in little tiny steps. We work on in a step-by-step manner. And in fact, our program, what's very curious about it is that every single reader builds on the ones before it. So you can't actually read them out of sequence. Reader 14, for instance, presupposes an understanding of all the readers that go before it. And if you've prepared yourself properly, if you've read readers 1 through to 13, then when you get to reader 14, there's just a little bit of new information that you need to learn. And again, that makes it quite easy for the student to cope with it well, to read successfully, and to gain confidence from the experience. If you look at other reading programs, what you'll find is that although they tend to have reading levels, inside those reading levels, there isn't a great deal of difference between the reading difficulty of the books in the level. Whereas if you look at our reader levels, which come in packs of, sets of 10, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, etc., well, inside that there's a huge difference between the early readers in that set and the latter ones. So if you pick up reader 11, it's a lot easier than reader 20, even though they're still in the same set. So from that you can see that actually our program is far more structured than your average reading program. If you look at the way we piece together our program a bit further, you see that in the first reader we actually only use 13 letters. Now the great thing about this is it means that once the children have mastered only half the alphabet, they can already start reading, and they already get that success experience of finishing their first reader, which they actually consider a book. So they feel like they've read a book, having only needed to learn half of the alphabet. And from there, we just proceed in small steps. So in reader 2, we learn another 4 letters, and in reader 3, 4 more, and so on until we cover the entire alphabet. But it's very important for us to get the children reading as quickly as possible because it's a lot more fun that way. It's a lot more meaningful to them. If they learn all of the letters before they start to read, if they learn the digraphs and other things like that, they won't know what they're doing it for, and it will quickly become boring and easy to forget, because when you learn something and then put it into practice, it's a lot easier to remember it. Whereas if you learn letters but never actually practice those letters, at least not for quite some time, it's very easy to forget them. Let's turn to the actual readers now. In the first 5 readers, as mentioned, we cover the 5 basic vowel sounds. So here's reader 1, and look at all those at sounding words. And that's the great thing about a reader, is we're very careful in the words we choose, and they're all there for a specific purpose. In this reader, we're trying to really reinforce and teach the basic vowel sound a, and so you'll see all those at words, f, at, k, at, etc. In reader 2, we're teaching the basic vowel sound I, as in pig. Again, look at all those I words like p, I, g, I, in, w, I, g. In reader 3, we teach the basic letter sound a, as in bug, and again you see quite a few up words on the page. In reader 4, we're teaching ot, as in dot, so we've got words like h, ot and p, ot, and in reader 5, e, as in head. Now, one very curious thing about the way we actually teach these vowels is we didn't teach them in alphabetical order. Usually the vowels are taught A, E, I, O, U, which is alphabetical order, but we didn't just unthinkingly teach them in that order, because what we always do is we teach from easiest to hardest. That's very important psychologically, and so we actually taught the at first, but then we went it, because that was the second easiest letter. So we taught them in, as I said, difficulty, in ascending difficulty, as opposed to just alphabetical order, because we've found through experience that you get a much better result that way. We want kids to grow in confidence as they read. We don't want to hit them with things which are more difficult too soon. This here is reader 6, and if you look at reader 6, you'll get an idea of the gentle progression of our program and the way we just build reader by reader. In this reader we have 2 new special words, the words I and have. But we've also got other special words like that, but that we learned in reader 3, and all the other words on the page we can just sound out using basic letter sounds. So you see, it's not too difficult, it's not too big a jump to go from, say, reader 5 to reader 6, because the only major new material you need to learn are those 2 new special words, the I and the have. We've also got an X series, an extension series, and this is important because what we've found is because there's so much new information to learn in readers 1 to 10, in other words, the whole alphabet, you've got to learn all the lowercase letters, all the capital letters, that's a lot of information to learn. Well, if you don't consolidate that and you rush on to readers 11 to 20, you can sometimes find that about halfway through, a bit maybe towards the end of that set, things start to get difficult and children struggle. So what we want to really make sure we do is give them a very solid foundation to work from, and so we've developed the X series, which goes over all of the information covered in readers 1 to 10, but extends it. So if you look down the bottom of reader 4X, you'll see what we've termed some longer words like 7, swim and pond. And these words will be longer than the ones found in reader 4, but they're only using the same material. So they're using the same letters that children have learnt up to that point. If we go on to readers 11 through to 20, what you'll see is we start to, at this point, really systematically introduce the digraphs. For instance, in reader 14, we teach the as in sister, or in reader 20, the a as in day. And as a rule, one by one, we teach new digraphs or new sounds in readers 11 through to 20. To give you an idea of the actual text, let's take a look at the right-hand page here, and you'll see this is reader 19. And you've got here the special sound being taught is R as in Mark. But if you look over the page, you're going to see a whole combination of digraphs which we've learnt in previous readers, special words which we've learnt in previous readers, and also a few special words which appear in this reader. So if you look at words like looked, well, the U sound comes in earlier around about reader 16. The word flash, you've got the sh digraph, well, that's taught in reader 17. In the word wall, we've got the digraph all, that was taught in reader 15. And so you see how this reader 19 really is building on all the ones that came before it. And then you've got words like space, which is a special word. So again, it's very important to read in sequence. Here we've got some more readers from the set 11 through to 20. In reader, here we've got reader, I believe, 18, where we're teaching the in digraphs. So you've got words like keeping, living. Notice that we use that new sound being taught in as many words as we can to really reinforce it in the minds of students. On the next page, we've got reader 20, where we're teaching the new sound A as in clay or day or hay. And those words come into the reader quite a bit. As we move on to the upper reader levels, then of course things get a little bit more complex. Here are some readers from 21 to 30. Now if you just look at the text, it's becoming a little bit thicker, a little bit more advanced. If we move on to readers 31 to 40, it continues to advance in difficulty level. Here we start to teach in these readers the long vowels. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got reader 31, which teaches the A something E digraph, for instance, in the word cake or rake or baked. On the next page, we teach the I something E digraph, as in like. Moving on to readers 41 to 50, you see now the text is starting to resemble something much closer to what you're going to find in general literature. And that's the beautiful thing about our program, is once students progress through to the end of reader 60, then the jump from that to regular literature like Harry Potter's or even newspapers is very small, and so children have no difficulty whatsoever reading, as I said, just general stories and books after finishing our program. Just have a look at some of the words here. We've got longer words like passengers and Chinese and American. On the next page, we've got things like advertisement, fabulous, brightened. And then when we move on to the final reading series, the 51 to 60, then the language gets a fair bit more complex still. And as you'll see from the length of the words used, it really is not at all very different from just regular literature. So we've got words here like perseverance and commitment and concentration and conscientious. And here we've got the final reader, reader 60, where we're teaching the the digraph k, as in Nicholas or echoing or chasm. And notice one thing we do is if we've got digraphs which look the same, what we're going to do is teach the most common one first. So in reader 21 we taught the ch digraph, and we waited now till reader 60 before teaching the k as in chasm. Our readers are also very easy to use. That's one of the great things about them. You know, of course, they're number coded. So they go in order 1 through to 60. They're color coded. That means that each reader level has the same color, and that's going to go with the other supplementary materials like the workbooks. All new information in every reader is very easy to find. You don't have to go to the master list to find it. You can just turn to the back of the book to find the new sounds and the special words being used, or you can just open up to the inside of the book and you'll see the new sounds being taught in the reader. That makes it very easy for a teacher to use. As we've kind of hinted at, we're very careful to get the psychology right in our teaching. Some of the basic things we do which meet with success are, firstly, create success experiences for our students. Remember, we said we go in a very systematic step-by-step manner. That means that we don't give the students too much new material to learn at any one time. We just teach them a little bit, then they learn that, then we teach them a little bit more, which means that all the while they're progressing in a very comfortable manner, they're feeling on top of what they're doing, and because they can do it all, then they tend to really enjoy learning to read and write. We always endeavour to make our readers entertaining. One of the problems with many phonics readers is because they need to use a very restricted vocabulary, because we're focusing on special sounds being taught or digraphs being taught, they tend to be a little bit dry. But we do our very best to make all of our stories entertaining. So here, if you see the very end of the first reader, a fat cat, you've got this kind of ludicrous situation where you've got a rat on a bat, on a cat, in a hat, on a mat. Now, as adults, we know we've got a slightly jaded sense of humour, so we might not find that too entertaining, but little kids really find that hilarious. And so you can see when you take the kids through our readers that they do enjoy them, they really love the stories, which of course makes it a lot easier to teach them because they want to learn, they enjoy learning. Another key thing in our system is creating variety, and that's one of the reasons why it's important that we have now developed the supplementary material, because that means that using our program, there's always something different that the students can use to learn, and that tends to help keep their attention. If students do the same thing too long, they tend to grow bored and uninterested. But if you can change what they're doing then and teach them the same material in different ways, then they tend to learn very effectively. Here's a game, Alphabetics, which we've designed, which is a little bit like Scrabble, where you've got to form words, but the great thing about it is that it also uses digraphs. So we've got different sorts of digraphs, more vowel-like sounding digraphs like R, and more consonant-type sounding digraphs like sh. You also notice that each card actually has a level number. Now, this level number is going to correspond to a reader level. So level 22 corresponds to reader 22, and that means that you can actually calibrate the game to the reading level of your students. If they've got up to reader level 22, then you just use all the Alphabetics cards up to level 22. That way they won't ever encounter material that they're unfamiliar with, for instance digraphs they haven't yet learnt. Another subtle thing we do is give things positive loading wherever we can. What that means is simply we try to term things as positively as possible. For instance, we don't call things words like said, sight words or tricky words, because if we call them sight words, well, firstly, that's a bit boring. And if we call them tricky, then the students are going to start to worry that they can't learn them. So we call them special words, and by calling them special words, children actually end up getting quite excited to be learning them. So it's just a psychological trick, really, but by incorporating such things, we can change the psychological framework in which students learn, and as a result get far better results. Okay, so let's just quickly go over some of the supplementary material we've got in our program. One of the first places to start is the alphabet book, and this teaches the basic letters and the sounds they make. Here we've got exercises, for instance, in discrimination, where we're teaching children just the basic sounds each letter makes. So the at goes with the apple, for instance, and the b with the bat. We have pages where they get to practice writing the letters and practice the sounds they make, as in at, as in apple, and they'll go at as in arrow. We also teach what we call true phonics in our program. What I mean by that is if you take something like the alphabet chart, for instance, or alphabet freeze, often you're going to find a lot of problems with most of the ones you'll see in the classroom. For instance, imagine a word like, or a letter like X And what image do you tend to see on most alphabet freezers? Well, you're going to see usually either a xylophone or an X-ray. But of course, a xylophone starts with a Z sound and an X-ray starts with an E sound, none of which work. So what we've done is we've gone X as in box. Or if you look at, say, the letter G, sometimes you'll find a giraffe on the picture, but that's a J sound as opposed to a G sound, which is the sound the letter G makes. And so we're always very careful to use appropriate images, etc., and to teach the appropriate sounds for the letters. Now, when it comes to writing letters, then we've actually developed some pretty neat ideas too. What you'll find is that basic print actually only uses two types of stroke, straight lines and circles. So here are some straight line letters, here are some circular letters or part of circle letters, and here you've got letters which use both straight lines and circles together. Now, the important thing about this is by knowing that, we can actually prepare students for writing. We can give them pre-writing exercises. So here we've got some pages in the alphabet book where we get students to practice straight lines and we get them to practice circles. So you can imagine after they've practiced drawing enough straight lines and enough circles, then they're actually going to be able to write the letters. Little kids don't have great fine motor skills. Their coordination isn't generally highly developed, so we need to do some of this practice. And if we do the pre-writing exercises, then by the time they get to writing the letters, they'll be much more competent. As a result, they'll tend to do it well, and then they'll like learning to write. If they struggle, however, then we end up with a lot of problems. Our program, because it's been developed over 36 years and had all that classroom experience, is very precise. And so things like what letters do you teach children to write first have been decided for us, in a sense, just by a trial and error in the classroom. And so we've learnt things like to teach students L, I and T as the first letters to write with. Why? Because they're the easiest ones to write. So if we get students to practice writing these letters, they're going to be able to do that successfully. They'll grow in confidence, and then they'll be able to go on to more difficult letters. But if they start with letters, for instance, S, which is quite a popular one, then at least when they're young, if they're 3, 4, sometimes 5, then if they try to write the letter S, because it requires such a degree of coordination, they're going to struggle. As a result, they're not going to like learning to write, and they're going to not want to do it. So it's very important psychologically to get them starting on things they can do and build, as we said, to higher degrees of difficulty. We also have special techniques for getting children to write on the lines. One problem teachers often face is when you're teaching kids to write, there'll be one letter down the bottom of the page, one up, and floating in half out of space, and another letter here, there, and everywhere, and it becomes very messy. So we divide letters up into 3 categories: tall, short, and hanging. We liken them to animals. For instance, tall are like giraffes, short are like, for instance, wombats, and hanging could be like monkeys or snakes or bats. And by introducing letters in this framework, it helps greatly get children to write on the lines, because we frame the letters in between what we call the roof and the floor. A lot of this information and a lot more can be found in the teacher's guide. So this is an invaluable resource for teachers, parents and educators, in that it not only covers all of the basic theory behind our method in very simple and easy to understand terms, it's also got over 100 pages of teacher resources. And so what this means is that as a teacher or educator, you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. We've got things like spelling tests, we've got things like lesson plans, which really make your life a lot easier. So our program, and this is one of the benefits of it, is very easy to use. It's designed so that you don't need to spend hours and hours and hours learning it before you can use it effectively. We've got all the information there right for you in easy to digest form. So the teacher's guide is an invaluable resource for this, and it makes using the Fitzroy method very simple indeed. To teach the basic letter sounds, we've also got the Fitzroy sounds, and that's a CD which can play the students, which teaches them the basic sounds. For instance, here, if we were teaching them the basic sound B, the CD would go something like but for bird, but for bird, but for bird, but. Obviously in a slightly nicer voice, but you get the understanding of how it goes. And so the children are going to sing along with this CD, and they're going to have a lot of fun. And kids love doing this, and without even realizing what they're doing, they're going to be learning the sounds the letters make. So this shows you a bit of variety. It's another activity they can do, some singing, but it's a fabulous way for children to learn the basic letter sounds, which, as we said, is the foundation of good phonics program. Sometimes in different places, letters are given slightly different pronunciation. So what we've done with the Fitzroy sounds is we've actually got 2 CDs which have 2 versions of the sounds. We've got the more traditional classical pronunciations on one CD, and we've got other less common but regularly used enough pronunciations on the second CD. This means that whatever pronunciation you give for the different letter sounds, it's going to be covered in our program. Another key feature of our program are the Fitzroy word skills, which are the workbooks which accompany the readers. What these effectively do is firstly teach children to write well, and second, they're going to teach all the grammar children are going to need to know. That's one key feature of our program, is that it covers grammar to a very high level. In fact, by the time students have finished with our program, they're probably going to have learnt enough grammar to cover them even for their high school years. So it's one of the most thorough grammar courses on the market today. Here are some examples of sheets from the workbook. We've got sheet 1A. Now 1A corresponds to reader 1. We're teaching the basic letter sound at, so you can see we've got a lot of practice with at words. We teach a special word A. We teach them A as a special word, so they don't say as in fat cat. If they say as in a fat cat, they're going to confuse the sound with the sound the letter U makes, which is also And so again, that's just a small detail, but over the years we've learnt to make a special word and give it that long vowel sounding pronunciation so that children don't confuse it with the sound the letter U makes. In the early stages, children are going to use our various resources together. So for instance, they're learning the basic letter sounds with the alphabet book. They're starting to write some words and letters in the workbooks, but then from time to time they'll go back also again to the alphabet book. So here are some pages with the alphabet book where children start reading the first sentences with just 2-letter words and images. So you can see we're going step by step. We start off, they learn single letters, then they learn 2-letter words, then they start reading sentences with 2-letter words and images, and later on when they get to their first reader, they'll start reading sentences with 3-letter words and no real images to help them read. Here's some more sheets from the workbooks. You've got just fill in the missing letter on the left-hand side of the page, and then as early as the first reader, here's sheet 1D, we actually get them to start to write whole words, and this is critical. We want to get children writing as quickly as possible. If they don't write much and if they just read, then they'll become competent readers but bad writers. And what can happen then is the gap between reading and writing ability increases until such point that children want to read but will never want to write, and once that happens you have a problem. So we actually teach in our program the 2 things simultaneously. We teach reading and writing at the same time, and even though it is easier to read and even though we expect children to be slightly better readers than writers, it's very important that we do teach them more or less at the same time. By the time children get to creating their first words and forming words, they've actually already learned a lot of skills. One problem children with phonics programs sometimes have is they learn to sound out words like d, o, g, but they can't actually hear that it's the word dog. And that's a problem. They can sound out, but they don't comprehend. So we've got a whole lot of listening games where we teach them these skills. For instance, in Good Ears, we have a very simple game where we take a 3-letter word, we divide it up into 2 sounds, d, og, and we'll say that to the students, like d, og, and then they have to tell us what the word is. They'll tell us it's dog. And then in the more advanced version, we break the word down into individual sounds, d, o, g, and they have to tell us it's dog. So they start getting a lot of practice just hearing whole words from letter sounds even before they read their first reader. We also have other listening games. For instance, here's Number Ears, where children have to listen very attentively to the number of sounds in a word. So the word book has 4 letters, but only 3 sounds, book. And remember, phonics is all about sound. So if we can get children to hear the sounds in words, then they're going to become much better spellers, and that's why our program's developed all of these games. Here's another simple game called Windmills, where we get children just to form their basic first words, and we might put in the centre of the windmill a basic vowel sound, and then maybe even fill in the right hand side with a letter, and then we get them to put in letters on the left hand side to form words. Again, this is just basic word forming practice. In the work, turning back to the worksheets, the E sheets tend to be word games. The F sheets are comprehension. This is critical. We always test children with comprehension at the end of every reader, because otherwise with phonics sometimes, as we mentioned, they can sound out words, they can sound out sentences, but they don't actually understand what they're reading. So we need to teach them to sound out and comprehend at the same time. You see how even as we progress with the readers, everything, the readers and the supplementary material all works beautifully together. So here let's look at reader 12. We see the new sound is E as in B. If we go down to the actual text, we see there's a lot of E words like we and B. B's actually comes up quite a few times. If we go to reader worksheet 12A, which is focusing on the new sound, E as in B, you'll see again there are lots of E words like be, we, he, etc. And if you look at the special words used in reader 12, they're please, ring, bear, love and find, and we go to worksheet 12B, which is focusing on special words, you'll see all those words there, bear and find, please, ring, etc. So all of our material works beautifully together to really reinforce the lessons being taught. As we move up to higher levels, we see that we begin to introduce more and more grammar. So we teach the parts of speech, but again we do these in a very step-by-step manner. So in reader 29D, for instance, we teach just 2 rules about nouns. The name of a person is a noun, the name of a thing is a noun. In 31D, we actually just repeat that rule, but phrasing it slightly differently. So we say the word for a thing is a noun, the name of a person is a noun. And we just get them to do very basic exercises like put things in categories of nouns, not nouns, etc. And so we go step by step. In reader 32D, we add an additional rule to the ones we've just given. So we say that rule, the name of a thing is a noun, the name of a person is a noun, and then we add the name of a place is a noun. And if we jump a fair bit forward to 55C, we then start looking at other more advanced types of nouns like proper nouns, where we explain that a proper noun names a particular person, place or thing. For example, Mary, Sydney, Christmas are proper nouns. So if we just jump to sheet 55C and talked about proper nouns, things might get confusing. Or if we taught all the different types of nouns and gave all of the rules for nouns at the same time, again, children would get confused. But by doing it in a very simple step-by-step manner, then it makes it easy for children to absorb the information. As a result, they do it successfully and they enjoy learning grammar. We teach things like the tenses. We obviously teach punctuation. Again, punctuation is taught in the same manner, easiest to hardest. So, for instance, here we've got the example of comma. Commas for lists are the simplest form of comma, like apples, comma, oranges, comma, bananas, and pineapples. And then we've got commas as a pause, which we teach, which is just a little bit more advanced. So we teach that later. So the commas for list was taught in reader 43C, but and we taught the pause in reader 46C. Again, as we go up through the readers, you'll see how everything works beautifully together. In reader 43, we teach, for instance, the new sound air as in care, and if we look at 43A, we're practicing the air as in care. If we look at the text for reader 43, we're going to see words like share, careful, Claire, quite a few words which are using this sound. Now as we go up to the higher levels, word skills books 5 and 6, you'll see that we now start talking about things like antonyms and indefinite pronouns and different types of nouns. We look at quoted, unquoted speech, compound words, the use of apostrophes. We have proper crosswords, all sorts of word puzzles. And one thing which again makes teaching really easy is we've got answer books for all of this. So this makes correcting very quick. And it also helps you sometimes when there's a grammatical point which you may not have studied for, so many years, then you've got the answers there right for you. So it makes working with our method very easy. It's very good also where English is a second language or a foreign language, because even if the teachers aren't, aren't experts in English, then they can still manage the system quite well. Here are some examples from the answer books. We've got the word finds where all the words are clearly marked. We've got punctuation where you can see the punctuated bits are all italicized. Here are the answers for all sorts of other exercises from the answer books. Comprehension questions which are answered too. So it makes using our method very easy because there are these answer books. We've also developed a whole lot of ways to test students. In the Teacher's Guide we've got spelling tests. Here we've also got end of level tests which test students on the most difficult parts of each reader level. We've got end of level tests for all of the different reader sets. And so you can see what you're going to find then with our system is that it's comprehensive both in terms of teaching reading, writing and grammar, and it's easy to use because it does proceed in such finely graded steps. So to sum it up, how does it work? Well, it teaches things in a step-by-step manner. We start off teaching the sound each letter makes. We go on to teach the digraphs, that's the letter combinations like ch and sh. Then we teach spelling rules, and we also teach the special words, the 50 most common, and a few more special words which we need to know. Now, the important thing to note is that the actual digraphs, spelling rules, and special words, they're not taught one after the other. They're all just integrated bit by bit throughout our program to make them very easy to absorb. And the other key thing is we do teach grammar, so we provide a very thorough grammar course. Not surprisingly, we've had a lot of people from university professors to famous writers who have really found a lot of use for our program, who have enjoyed it, found it very useful, and are quite happy to recommend it. What promise do we make? Well, to summarise, to conclude, really, the Fitzroy readers guarantee a complete literacy program and upon its completion, excellence in English. So this is the promise we give to all of our users, and it's something that we've found we've been able to do thanks to our 36 years of classroom experience. We've been able to successfully teach thousands and thousands of students all around the world. Wherever we've gone, we've got tremendous results. We've had students who have previously struggled to read, and then often as little as about 6 weeks on our program, these students jump a few year levels of reading ability, going from the slower, least good readers in their class up to the very first and best readers of the class. So we hope that this presentation gives you a better idea of some of the strengths and benefits of our program. And if you have any questions, then please just write into us at Fitzroy Readers or the Fitzroy Learning Centre. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope to be seeing you in person soon. So thank you.